Hey guys, welcome to another episode of StuTube. It is September the 23rd, and today I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about the good, the bad, and the ugly on the Bitcoin price. As well, I'm going to be talking about a pattern that nobody else is talking about yet, and I'm going to be going into a trade that I took today and why. And if that sounds good to you guys, then you should definitely check out what I have to say. Alright guys, I'm going to start by looking at the Bitcoin daily chart here, and you'll notice between my purple lines, this is the pattern that I was talking about that I haven't seen anybody else talking about. And to me this looks like there is potentially signs here that a falling wedge is forming. It is still way too early to say, but I'm just going to keep my eye out on it. I have my trend lines here mapped out on my macro trend. You can see here we have our one touch point, our two touch points, and you guys know that right before a dump when I see patterns like that, even on the 15-minute chart, I tend to extend those lines and quite often we'll get a third touch point in the not too distant future, and we need that third touch point before we can break out for me to have a lot of confidence in the trade. Not that it necessarily needs a third touch point, but it really just I like to have three touch points on a trend line before making that trade. Also, ideally, we would get our third touch point, a little bit of a pullback, and then breakout and our retest. And you guys know that I am waiting for a retest still of this white line down here, which would be my macro triangle on the weekly chart, but here on the daily you can see it quite clearly as well. One thing that would make a lot of sense, and this is kind of where things get interesting, is if we are indeed in this pattern, and you guys have seen in the last week I pointed out a couple times where I was looking at the third touch point of the support on a falling wedge. One thing that I really am interested to see is if we keep coiling up in this pattern, and if we were to drop right to this general area here where these lines intersect, yes, it would be quite a large dump yet, and yes, it looks scary, but that could be quite bullish, guys. Not only would we get our third touch point along this falling wedge support, we would also finally get that retest of my white triangle that I've been spewing on about for months now at this point. And that would be very interesting to see. And another thing that's interesting here is if I pull a Fibonacci retracement from where our COVID dump happened to, where we bottomed out, up to our current high around 12.4, 12.5 thousand, somewhere in there. Notice that I have mentioned before that it would make a lot of sense to retest our 382 level of the macro trend here, and that is also lining up absolutely perfectly with both those trend lines. So there is a lot of indications right now, in my opinion. Of course, none of this is financial advice. Always do your own research. None of these patterns have to play out at all. I'm just giving you my insight and things that I'm watching for. I'm not necessarily trading them because it obviously depends how the chart looks leading up to it and that sort of stuff. But that is definitely a very interesting point in the chart for me. Not only that, not only the 382, but look, it's also support for this whole trading range here. There's a lot of confluence there, guys. So that's a very interesting level, in my opinion, to reach down to before we would actually get some sort of a bull market here with reaching new all-time highs. Nothing saying this has to play out quickly, because everybody seems to be so sure that Bitcoin's either just going to blast off and hit new all-time highs, or it's absolutely going to dump. And I think we might have a little more coiling up in some sort of a wedge pattern here before we would break to the upside, if we even get that break to the upside, guys. Alright guys, now hopping into what I was claiming to be the bad and the ugly here. You know that in previous videos I have been pointing out the US dollar index, and generally when the US dollar is moving to the upside, Bitcoin is doing the exact opposite. So you can see here, I had this yellow trend line going down here. We were consolidating below it. and I had pointed out that we had a fairly bullish divergence on the RSI to go with that, so I was watching for a bit of a breakout of that. As well, I extended this red resistance line down, and you can see here we were really flirting with it in this area, but we got our break and we are moving up higher. One more level of resistance that I see is this purple line, and that's much like the wedge I just showed you on Bitcoin, guys, just on a much larger scale, but it's our two highest points here, and then just extending that line down. So we are flirting with a potential area of resistance coming up within the next day or two, I would say. If we blast through that, especially if we get a retest down and blast off from that purple trend line, Bitcoin might be in for a little bit of a tumble, unfortunately. If, however, we get this, even if we consolidate in here and then break down, that's where we might see Bitcoin enter a whole new bull market. And my guess is if we were to break this green trend line, I think that it would line up fairly well with how Bitcoin is in that potential falling wedge that I was showing you guys. Maybe even as it broke down here, we would see Bitcoin flirting with that white triangle of mine and then blasting off from there. Again, none of this has to happen. These are just speculations and just keeping an eye on it for now and that sort of stuff. All right, I want to talk to you guys a little bit about the fundamentals of what's going on here, and this is kind of where I had mentioned that things might get a little ugly. Uh, as most of you are well aware, the Fed has been printing billions and billions of dollars because of the coronavirus pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. And the theory behind Bitcoin being a good hedge is that Bitcoin cannot inflate because once it's all mined, it is all mined. And of course, that's years and years down the road because of the halvings and that sort of stuff. It will take, well, probably won't even happen in our lifetime. I honestly don't know because normally I don't follow fundamentals, and you guys know that. I'm strictly trend lines, chart patterns, that sort of stuff, all technical analysis. But today is going to be a little different. Going back to that, with Bitcoin not being able to be inflated, I don't necessarily agree with that. And again, since I'm not heavy into fundamentals, you guys can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section. If I am wrong, please do correct me. I'm always willing to listen. But so if the Fed and central banks and whoever is printing these billions of dollars and Bitcoin cannot be printed, but there is an asset that can be printed, and you guys have probably all heard of Tether before, and a lot of you probably exit into Tether when you don't want to be in the market. And you guys know that Tether gets minted, I believe it's called. And essentially to me, it just seems like it's another money printing scheme. And to me, yes, you can't just print Bitcoin, but if you can just print another currency and buy Bitcoin with it, how is that any different in the inflation sense? Like, is that not just going to be the same thing that you can just print another currency and then buy Bitcoin with it? So you're technically still inflating the price artificially. For example, if I was to be able to just print billions or trillions of Canadian dollars and just move it over into the American dollars, would that not still be creating inflation? To me, that's just something to keep on the radar. I don't want to sound overly bearish when I say this. It's just something to keep in mind. But guys, most markets over time do tend to grow. Prices go up. Everything gets inflated. And I still am extremely bullish long term. I want to make that clear. I don't think $20,000 is the end of the road for Bitcoin. I think that it'll go higher. Obviously, doesn't have to happen. And if it doesn't, whatever. As a trader, we can just play the volatility both directions, guys. But that's just an interesting way of looking at the fundamentals of Bitcoin being unable to be printed. Again, maybe I'm wrong. Please correct me if I am. Let me know what you think about that theory in general. With that being said, guys, you know that I've been extremely bullish basically since I started making videos, but I have also mentioned I'm not 100% moon boy and I am willing to play the volatility to the downside. And that's exactly what I did today. I did end up taking a short as much as I haven't really been wanting to play the short side recently. I just want to show you what led me to take this short here at 10,477 US dollars. I took some of my profits at about 10,280. Took half my position off the table, and I have the remaining half on the table, and I'll show you kind of a couple things that I'm keeping my eye on here. Why I took this trade, you know how important that 618 fib line is to me and how often I look for rejection on that point. Here I have this little bit of a yellow trading range, so if I zoom back in, I want to take my Fibonacci from the top of this trading range, this is the highest point I can find, to where we bottomed out here at just under 10.4K. And so you can see here that we did actually get above our 0.618. We even reached our 786 fib line, but we never stayed above it long, with basically an hour, hour and a half, something like that, because this is only a 15-minute chart, guys. We did get this red body close below the 618 back down, and from there we kind of had a bit of a bounce, never even made it to our 618, started closing red candles, and I figured, you know what, this looks like a classic 618 rejection. Even though we did make it above, it seemed like a bit of a fake out, so I was looking to play a short. So I played a 25x short from, like I said, 10,477. I think down at 10,280 was something like, it was damn near a 50% profit that I took on half the position. It was like 45, something like that. Now what I'm looking for, obviously, would be, once again, extending my peaks. That's this trend line. I have this red one running down here. If we start closing candles above that line, I have an alert set on it, and I will be looking to potentially exit my trade. Although if we don't get some sort of a third test of the line before breaking out, I will be looking at it as being a potential fake out again, where it would instantly close back down below and continue the tumble lower. But more importantly would be this yellow line, the bottom of my rising channel there. If we break above that, I'm going to stop out the rest of my position in a very small profit, and yeah, just basically go from there. But another thing I'm interested in is really getting finicky here is this green line going down here. I have played a couple trades in the last few weeks that have been on a very similar trend line, and quite often when you have two wicks that are kind of indicating the lows of a fairly quick range, quite often I'll extend those lines, much like up here, except doing the same downwards from here. Quite often we'll get our third touch point there as well, guys. So I would not at all be surprised if we got a third touch point along this red line and absolutely just dump. And if we retest that green line, guys, that's getting close, depending how fast it happens. But you can see that we're getting in that territory of that 9,600-ish area, in which case we may very well fill that gap, the CME futures gap that everyone's all gung-ho about. That may be filling sooner than later now. We're going to have to watch how it plays out, but that's definitely something that's on my radar right now. And that's why I want to keep a little bit of my position open, because that would go from a, whatever I said, 45% profit or whatever. That's looking at more, what's 8 times 25? That's getting closer to a 200% profit, guys. So that's getting triple digits. That is absolutely beautiful. Once again, none of this has to happen, but I like to leave a little bit of my position open with a trailing stop loss or a break-even stop loss, just so that I can potentially catch a much bigger move than I already have. Alright guys, I think I've rambled on long enough. I just wanted to pump out this quick video because, as I've told you in the previous video, I have been working much longer days out of town recently, and I haven't been able to pump out near as many videos as I would have liked to, especially during this volatility that we have entering the market. But unfortunately, once again, this is not my full-time job yet. This is just a side hustle, and hopefully I get there someday, but until then, you just get videos when you get them. with that, guys, oh, actually, one more thing I wanted to point out with this falling wedge here, potential falling wedge. I wanted to add another purple line here. Just since this is a daily chart, I'm gonna give a decent amount of weight to this peak here, even though we never got our third touch point on that top purple line. I also want to keep my eye on this line because maybe we'll get a little bit different of a falling wedge. Either way, I want to have my eyes set on that trend line. So again, guys, think I've rambled on long enough. Hopefully you got some good insight on the market. Let me know what you think in the comments with some of my theories. Let me know how I can improve the channel. It's still a new channel, always willing to hear out from my audience here, make changes if you guys want me talking about anything specific, that sort of thing. With that being said, guys, if you could please leave a like, it really helps with the YouTube algorithm and it just shows a little interest in the channel. That would be absolutely great. Can't thank you guys enough. Subscribe if you haven't. And with that, I'm out. Stay safe, my friends. Peace.